Hey everybody, this is Darren Van Dam and you are watching Flick Connection, the show that helps you get more out of movies, and today we're going to talk about the best viral outbreak, pandemic movies currently available on Netflix. So now seems as good a time as any to talk about these movies. There are some great zombie movies, outbreak movies, isolation movies that don't quite mean there's a viral outbreak or anything. And if you're watching this in the future and it doesn't make sense to combine those things, just go back in Wikipedia and see what happened in 2020 and it'll all make sense. We're jumping right into the list, but before that, this video is sponsored by CyberGhost VPN. More on them later in the video. My number 20 pick is a movie called Carriers. This actually stars Chris Pine, and I think this came out right before Star Trek, so this is right before he really sort of blew up. And this is a very small movie, but it's about a group of people fleeing a pandemic, like a bad one. They're on the road, so it's kind of a road movie. It doesn't really go like in a Mad Max territory. It's a much smaller movie than that, but it does have elements of that. It does have the isolationism. It's got obviously the fear of the pandemic. This one is going to be one of the few on this list that are maybe a little bit too real given what's going on right now, so watch it with caution. It's also the weakest pick. It's my number 20 pick, but it is interesting and it does deliver enough for this sort of small little hidden gem you probably never heard of on Netflix.
You just drive, I got this. 1, 2, 3.
Now I've got several Netflix original movies on this list. One of them that some people liked and some people didn't is How It Ends. This one came out last year, and it's about sort of the end of the world. There's these storms and there's just mass panic and sort of governmental collapse. And the story's about a guy and his soon-to-be father-in-law, reluctant father-in-law played by Forest Whitaker, go on this cross-country trip amid all this chaos to try to find his girlfriend and Forest Whitaker's daughter. And while I felt like the movie as a whole didn't really tie together that well, there's some great scenes in it, particularly one that takes place in and around a forest fire. But the movie, I think, left a lot of people wanting more because they hint at a lot of this sort of like bigger story that's happening sort of outside the walls of the movie. And that just seemed more interesting than what's actually happening for the most part inside this car with these two guys. Again, not a bad movie. It's just a little bit thin. So if you are aware of that going into it, it is enjoyable. Another Netflix original movie that is totally appropriate for the time but doesn't have to do with a viral outbreak or anything is a horror movie called Eli. Now this is about a little boy who has this immune disorder, and basically he's a bubble boy, and he's taken to this facility which is this old house which has supposedly been retrofitted to sort of like cater to people in his condition. But an old house like that, there's no way you could make that safe. There would be so many microbes and stuff in it. Look past that, and you've got a pretty decent horror movie. This little boy, he kept getting into trouble. I was surprised at just how many scares there were in this one. Some of them are cheap, other ones are not, so it's a pretty decent mix. And then it gets pretty wild and it goes off the rails, which I almost always appreciate. Here Alone is a zombie movie that's going to seem a little bit too real for some people. This is mostly about one woman surviving out in the woods after this massive outbreak. She's hiding out from zombies and marauders and whatever. Uh-oh. And occasionally has to go into town to sort of scavenge for food and stuff like that. Ends up running into another person, and from there the story starts to develop. But this one's a little bit upsetting because they really detail like how the outbreak starts, and it's not overly fantastical, you know, like symptoms are these little red bumps. There's a baby involved in the mix, and it can be a little icky. And again, it does feel fairly real. Yes, there are zombies running around, but not in the traditional sense. That aspect is kind of in the background of this story of this woman like surviving out on her own. Another Netflix original zombie flick, and there are several zombie movies on this list, is Cargo. This one takes place in Australia. It's about a father trying to survive a zombie outbreak with a very young daughter. She's probably 1 year old, and he's just trying to get through the outback. So it's a very interesting concept. This is actually based on a short film by the same name that is the exact same concept, and they did a good job of extrapolating upon it and creating a full story. This one's got some really great elements. It is sad, but really well put together, and kind of a touching zombie movie. It's a weird way to put it, but it definitely is.
What was that?
I don't know. Hello?
All right, and then we'll change things up a bit with another horror movie called Head Count. This one's about a group of college kids on spring break out in Joshua Tree, and something strange starts happening. The reason this one is appropriate for the current times is, yes, they do go outside, but they're all isolated out in this retreat, this vacation home out in the desert, and it very much is about them sort of like living together in this space, yet there's sort of maybe like the best way to put it is like a body snatcher type of a thing. And it's really starting to mess with people's heads, and it's hard to tell if it's real or if they're maybe doing psychedelics or what's happening. But given the setting for this one, I find it completely appropriate while everyone is self-isolating.
Make it one block at a time.
Bushwick is another different one for this list, and it's about a government collapse. This mysterious military force starts just taking people out in New York, and this is about a girl who's in Bushwick and runs into a guy played by Dave Bautista, and they're basically just trying to get out. And the interesting thing about this one is it's filmed as if it's one long shot. Now, in my opinion, they didn't do a great job delivering it. You can kind of tell when they're transitioning, but it's okay. It's not really a problem. It is a very small movie, so you can overlook some of the production flaws like that. And it does invest you into it. You are sort of like along for the ride with these people. I think with more money and a few changes to this movie, it could have been really fantastic. That said, it's still a pretty good watch.
Only in blood do we find the truth. And I will find it.
Unlike usual, this list is going to have a few series. One of them being the mini-series Dracula. Yes, I'm recommending Dracula. Now, I liked this one a lot. Didn't necessarily love the third episode. It is only 3 long, sort of movie-length episodes, but it's really well put together. It's got an interesting twist on Dracula without feeling like it's forced or just trying too hard, and it's really well produced. There are some amazing performances in this one. Just interesting, charismatic characters. I don't want to say the name of the character because that'll give away a twist, but there's a woman who's a nun in the beginning. She is the best part of the show, and the Dracula gene is very much like a virus, and he gets out and becomes this sort of like public health crisis thing. It's got similar vibes to the pandemic type thing, or at least it tries to go in that direction. It'd be a great thing to binge watch right now because even though it's only 3 episodes, I think it comes out to 4 or 5 hours long.
What if Monday's hurt or dead and the authorities find her before we do? We gotta help her. We gotta go out there.
What Happened to Monday is another Netflix original movie that deals with self-isolation. This takes place in a future where overpopulation has become a major issue, and they've essentially enacted China's one-child policy worldwide. It's illegal to have multiple children. Something is done with the children. They're like frozen or something. All this gets explained in like the first 5 minutes of the movie. And then Noomi Rapace actually plays 7 different sisters, and they're all hiding out together. This has a little bit of an Anne Frank element in there. It's got heavy sci-fi elements, and it's really great. It's very long. It's well over 2 hours, and there's a lot that they cram into that long time frame too. There's a lot happening with this story. This is one of the better Netflix original sci-fi efforts, and one that frankly I don't think a lot of people have seen or talk about. It is pretty great. It's got some good action, and also the story's very, very well developed. So we're getting into the better picks on this list already, and we haven't even got to the top 10 yet.
I just want to talk. And I want honest answers. Do you have any idea what's going on out there?
Now, a lot of people did not like It Comes at Night when it released. It is a very good movie in my opinion, but the title, It Comes at Night, would allow you to believe that there is something that literally comes at night. Not the case with this movie. I realize that's a spoiler, but the title is kind of a way of spoiling the movie if you're expecting something that you're not getting. That said, this one is extremely appropriate, but also watch this one at your own risk, because this one is terrifying given the current circumstance. It's gonna mess with your head. This one definitely takes place after some sort of contagious outbreak, and a family's trying to survive in this sort of secluded house, and they're trying to just stay away from people and not get sick. It's really well executed, very well directed, and really pretty chilling. Ultimately, what this movie is about is just fear, and fear is ultimately what comes at night. And when you realize that, this one really kind of makes the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. Before moving on to the top 10 on this list, I want to tell you about CyberGhost VPN. Like all VPN services, they help protect your web browsing, but in addition to that, CyberGhost has specialized servers that allow you to access Netflix in other countries. If you're in other countries and you want to see these recommendations because you do not have access to all of them, or you just want to see what's on in other countries and access more movies, CyberGhost costs as little as $275 a month when you use the link in the description. They have a 45-day money-back guarantee, so if you don't like it, it's easy to cancel. They have 24/7 customer support. You can use it on up to 7 devices simultaneously, and it works on Android, Mac, iOS, Windows, Chrome, Fire Stick. Most streaming devices are gonna work with CyberGhost, or follow the link in the description for a full list and to take advantage of that $275 price. I have been using it for quite a while, and I know a lot of you have as well. I've started getting comments from some of the users that have signed up for it saying how much they like it and how many more movies they're accessing because of it. So thanks for those. But let's go ahead and move on with the rest of the list.
Sometimes it takes 2 men to make one brother. It's your brain. Who are you? Not your eyes. Not your eyes. Not your eyes. Not your eyes. Not your eyes.
Now, kind of a hidden gem isolation-themed movie is Delirium. This stars Topher Grace, and he is under house arrest in this really grand house. And then really strange stuff starts happening. So if you start to get a little bit of cabin fever, start to go a little stir crazy, this is one that will mess with you, but it could be kind of fun to watch because there are moments where he has fun being in this giant mansion all alone, and then other parts that are really kind of creepy. So this one depends on you, but it is fun and interesting and doesn't really deal with any sort of sickness or viral outbreaks or anything like that.
This ain't no virus or a chemical attack. It is real evil. If you see it, it takes on the form of your worst fears.
Every contact we have had with the outside has brought us death.
Bird Box makes this list for completely obvious reasons. This one's about some major happening that's causing people to, I don't just want to say commit suicide, but just causing people to die by not protecting themselves very quickly, and everyone needs to sort of isolate into these homes. It's very, very similar to what's happening now, only way scarier. There's definitely this supernatural element happening, and this one's got some really good performances. Sandra Bullock's in it, John Malkovich, and it's got a lot of interpersonal tension and stuff, and then just some really interesting scenarios that play out. This one to me seemed like it could have developed into a series. It's based on a book, and so it does conclude itself in the course of the movie, but I did feel like this concept would lend itself really well to sort of a longer format, like a mini series or even a full-on series.
Something's happening, some sort of outbreak. People get this thing and they change. They're dead.
Speaking of miniseries, Dead Set is a zombie series that takes place basically on the set of Big Brother. It's only about 4 or 5 episodes, and it's the traditional zombies. They're running around, eating people's entrails out of their stomachs. Classic zombie stuff. but the Big Brother twist is interesting because everyone's in this isolation tank, basically, and don't know what's happening on the outside as the whole like crew is being ravaged by zombies. It makes for just a really interesting concept, and it all works out really well. This one was popular back when it came out, but it's over 10 years old now, and so I know a lot of you have either forgotten about it, or a lot of you probably never even saw it, as this was a BBC series. The Signal is an interesting one, and I can't say too much about it, but this stars Lawrence Fishburne, and it's about a guy who's sort of trapped inside a facility. That's really all I'm gonna say with it, but this one has some amazing cinematography at times. It's not really that great throughout. Very, very interesting concept. This one is like a Twilight Zone, Black Mirror type of a thing, but because it deals with this isolation and potentially some sort of weird thing happening outside, it definitely fits on this list. I'd love to say more. I have more to say about it. The reason to watch this one is to be surprised. So if you like the way it looks and you like my recommendations and you like where it's placed on the list, definitely add this to your watch list soon. The Rover is one that I have talked about recently on the channel. By the way, there's links to some other videos in the description, so if you're new here, go ahead and click the subscribe button, but you might also want to check out some additional recent uploads so you can get even more movies to watch. But The Rover takes place after some sort of a collapse. It's not really explained in the movie, which I liked. I thought that that was interesting because to the main characters that you're following, it doesn't matter. They're just trying to survive. And this isn't Mad Max level apocalypse, even though it does take place in Australia. This one feels very real. It feels like you're in the midst of everything coming down and people fending for themselves. It's dirty, it's gritty. Robert Pattinson gives a good performance. Guy Pearce is doing some of his best work. He's one of my favorite actors and he does a great job here. But this one's brutal and intense and very, very gritty, but it's not like your typical apocalyptic scenario, which I liked. It felt different to me. Another Netflix original zombie flick is Ravenous. This is a French-Canadian film, so it's mixed language. There are a lot of subtitles, but it's really creepy. It feels fresh. I know that's kind of a weird thing to keep saying where you're talking about viruses and zombies, but zombie movies are such overworn territory. There's so much repeating going on in that genre that when you find one that feels different, it's pretty great. Now this one does sort of deal with sort of traditional zombies. There's a couple little weird quirks, but the story just felt nice and different to me. It's about a group of people trying to survive. They sort of cross paths and try to survive together. There's this weird thing that the zombies do that make for some interesting visuals with this like giant stack of chairs. And this is a good one, very good story. Everything plays out really well. It's very well produced, just an all-around really good movie. Freaks is one of the newer release movies added to Netflix recently, and it did come out in theaters in sort of a limited release. A lot of people didn't see it, but it is really fantastic. Now, this is a smaller movie with a big concept, which means if they'd spent more money on it, it would have really kind of gone outside of this like house. This movie mainly takes place inside this dirty old house with a couple of exceptions, and the budget shows, but it's okay. It all works together well. There's some great performances, including one from a 7-year-old girl who does a really great job basically carrying this movie. And then it's got some very weird twists and stuff. The thing I will say, because I have seen it twice, is it's gonna skeeve you out at the beginning. It's very icky and gross as the things that are happening to this girl. I'm telling you, this is a good recommendation. A lot of people will like this movie. You kind of have to get past some of those elements, and then it all sort of falls into place and makes sense. Really different. It's hard to tell where this one is going, and I felt like it really delivered. It's one of the better things I think Netflix added in the month of March.
You'll have to take us out with you.
We're not moving. We're not moving!
You knew Outbreak was going to be on this list. They just added it recently. This is a classic movie with a huge cast. Dustin Hoffman, Kevin Spacey, Cuba Gooding Jr., Rene Russo. And of course, Morgan Freeman is in it. And this one's got some really great scenes of tension. In terms of just like a traditional viral outbreak where there's no zombies or anything kind of crazy sci-fi wise, this is like one of the top ones, or at least most watched ones ever. There's a couple of weird scenes in it, but they also are entertaining to watch. And then ultimately, this is just sort of like the worst case scenario for some like major deadly outbreak. Keep in mind, that's not what is currently happening. Again, if you're in the future, a lot of what I'm saying is going to be confusing, but Outbreak could make for a great watch if you don't let it get into your head too much. Okay, Outbreak was number 3. That means I've got 2 that I think are better than it, and they just happen. I did not plan this, but they just happen to both be from South Korea, so they do have subtitles. And the first one is not a movie, it's a series. It's a Netflix original series called Kingdom. And the cool thing about Kingdom is it takes place hundreds of years ago, so it is a period piece, it is a historical drama surrounding this massive zombie outbreak amongst this like dynasty. It's wild stuff. Great visuals because of the period piece and the zombies. It's 2 things you normally don't see together. And then the zombie outbreak is really well orchestrated. It takes 2 episodes to get into it as it ramps up, but it's all interesting leading up to it. And then the shit actually hits the fan at the end of the 2nd episode, and it never turns off. They just added season 2. It's wilder than season 1, but it's a really great show that is sort of catching fire. A lot of people are talking about it, so if you haven't picked it up yet, check out the first 2 episodes. If you're not hooked by then, maybe it's not for you. And then I've already hinted at it, but a lot of you probably already know, Train to Busan is my number 1 pick. It's been a long time since I've put it on a list because I used to talk about this movie too much, but it's only because in the comments you guys tell me over and over again how much you love this movie. I've watched this one in mixed company multiple times. I've yet to come across anyone that doesn't also love and enjoy this movie. This takes place in a zombie outbreak in Korea as a father and his daughter are on a train trying to get to Busan where they believe that they will be safe. Massive hordes of running zombies. This one feels like it could be taking place during the World War Z events. It's the same type of like fast outbreak that it just creates these hordes of sprinting zombies. There's some great practical effects in this, really fantastic story elements, and it's well worth reading the subtitles. If you normally don't do that, if you normally just pass on movies and you're stuck at home and you're running out of stuff to watch, even if you're not, take a chance on reading the subtitles here. It really is a fantastic movie. They are making a sequel. They're also doing an American remake. They're rarely as good as the originals, so check out the original. It's a fantastic film. But that is it for the list. I'd like to thank the Patreon supporters. I appreciate all of their donations. Here are all of the people who are donating $5 and up, but I've got tiers for $1 and $3 as well if you just want to help support the show a little bit. But go over there, check out that link as well. It's in the description, and see if it's for you. But I will keep making videos like this as long as you keep watching them. Thanks for checking out this episode, and you will see me on the next one. Uh-oh.